Nobody wanted the Omega until the Alpha King asked for something no one expected. Olivia Hart stood at the edge of the Moonridge pack, gathering grounds with her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to ignore the whispers drifting through the cool evening air. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine trees from the surrounding hills and the distant crackle of lanterns being lit one by one around the ceremonial square. Tonight should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like a public reminder of everything she had failed to become. 3 years had passed since her rejection. 3 years since the future she thought she would have vanished in front of hundreds of witnesses. Some wounds faded with time. Others simply learned how to hide beneath a smile. Olivia had become very good at smiling. She smiled when pack members forgot her name. She smiled when invitations never arrived. She smiled when younger Omegas found mates, started families, and moved into homes filled with laughter while she remained alone in a small cottage near the edge of the territory. The music began near the center of the square, drawing applause from the crowd. Olivia remained where she was. People rarely noticed her unless they needed someone to do a task no one else wanted. It was easier that way. Safer. Across the gathering grounds, groups of wolves laughed together beneath strings of golden lights. Children ran between tables decorated with late-season flowers. Everything looked warm and beautiful from a distance. Olivia felt like a shadow standing outside a window. Still hiding? A familiar voice asked. She turned to find her grandmother, Evelyn Hart, approaching with a knowing smile. Time had silvered her hair, but not her spirit. "I'm not hiding," Olivia replied softly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you standing 40 feet away from everyone else?" Olivia glanced toward the crowd. "Because they're happier without me there." Evelyn's expression saddened for only a moment. That's not true. Olivia wanted to believe her. She truly did. But years of being overlooked had a way of shaping a person's thoughts. Before she could answer, a sudden hush swept through the square. Conversation stopped. Music faded. Every head turned toward the main road leading into town. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. Something was happening. Riders appeared first, their dark cloaks moving in the wind. Then came the royal guards. The silver crest of the northern kingdom gleamed beneath torchlight. A ripple of excitement spread through the crowd. "The royal delegation," someone whispered. "Why are they here?" another asked. Olivia watched as the procession entered the square and stopped before the gathering platform. At the center stood a tall official dressed in black and silver. His expression was serious enough to silence even the most curious voices. The official unrolled a scroll marked with the royal seal. "By order of Alpha King Damon Blackwood," he announced. The title alone seemed to make the air heavier. Olivia had never seen the Alpha King. Few common wolves had. Stories about him traveled farther than he ever did. Some called him ruthless. Others called him brilliant. Most agreed on one thing. He always got what he wanted. The official continued. "All unmated female wolves between the ages of 21 and 26 are hereby summoned to attend the Winter Court gathering at Blackwood Palace 30 days from tonight." Gasps spread through the crowd. Excited murmurs followed immediately. Olivia frowned. Winter Court was one of the most prestigious events in the kingdom. Wolves from powerful families spent years hoping for an invitation. "Attendance is mandatory," the official added. "Names have already been recorded." More whispers. More speculation. Olivia expected the announcement to end there. Instead, the official lowered the scroll and spoke words that made the entire square freeze. "The Alpha King is seeking a future mother for the next royal heir." Silence. Complete and absolute. Olivia felt as though every lantern flame had stopped flickering at once. Then the crowd erupted. Questions flew in every direction. Excitement. Shock. Disbelief. Olivia barely heard any of it. Her gaze remained fixed on the royal messenger. Because for the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Not hope. Not happiness. Curiosity. And far beyond the mountains, inside a palace she had never seen, Alpha King Damon Blackwood was already looking at a list of names. Olivia Hart's name stood at the very top. 30 days passed faster than Olivia expected and slower than she wanted. Every morning, she woke with the same question lingering at the edge of her thoughts. Why would the Alpha King summon women like her to the Winter Court? The question followed her through every chore, every quiet walk through Moonridge, every sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling of her small cottage. By the time the first snow arrived, The entire territory seemed consumed by speculation. Some believed the Alpha King intended to choose a bride. Others claimed he was merely seeking candidates from noble bloodlines. Most agreed on one thing. Someone like Olivia Hart would never matter in a palace full of powerful wolves. The morning of departure arrived beneath a pale gray sky. Frost covered the ground like scattered crystals, and cold air drifted through the pine forest surrounding the village. Olivia adjusted her dark blue coat and stared at the royal carriage waiting near the center square. Several other unmated women from neighboring territories had already gathered nearby. Their elegant dresses and confident smiles made her feel even more out of place. "You can still turn around," Evelyn said softly beside her. Olivia glanced toward her grandmother. "Attendance is mandatory." "That is true," Evelyn smiled. "But fear is optional." Olivia laughed quietly despite herself. Her grandmother always seemed capable of finding light where nobody else could. "I am not afraid," Olivia said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Then why are your hands shaking?" Olivia looked down and discovered her grandmother was right. She folded her hands together. "Because I do not belong there." Evelyn stepped closer and gently squeezed her shoulder. "Maybe that is exactly why you do." Before Olivia could respond, the royal escort announced their departure. The journey north took nearly 2 days. Mountains rose around them, their peaks covered in snow that glowed silver beneath the winter sun. The farther they traveled, the quieter Olivia became. Every mile carried her farther from the only life she had ever known. On the second evening, the Blackwood capital appeared beyond the hills. Olivia felt her breath catch. She had never seen anything so beautiful. Towering stone walls surrounded the city. Thousands of lanterns illuminated the streets below like fallen stars. At the center stood Blackwood Palace. Massive towers stretched into the night sky, their windows glowing with warm golden light. The palace looked less like a building and more like something pulled from a storybook. "Welcome to Winter Court," one of the royal attendants announced. Olivia suddenly wished she could disappear. Inside the palace, servants guided the arriving guests through grand hallways lined with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Everything gleamed. Everything felt impossibly expensive. Olivia became painfully aware of every scuff on her boots and every imperfection in her clothing. The other women appeared completely comfortable. Many came from influential families. They spoke confidently about politics, alliances, and noble houses. Olivia knew nothing about any of it. During the welcome banquet, she chose a seat near the far end of the room and hoped nobody would notice her. Unfortunately, someone did. "Well," a woman said with a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. The palace really invited everyone. A few nearby guests laughed softly. Olivia recognized the familiar sting immediately. She had experienced it for years. The woman wore an emerald dress and introduced herself as Victoria Ashford, daughter of one of the kingdom's most respected families. "Which territory are you from?" Victoria asked. "Moonridge." "Interesting." Victoria sipped her drink. "I do not recall hearing anything important about Moonridge." More laughter followed. Olivia lowered her gaze and focused on her meal. Responding would only make things worse. "Perhaps the Alpha King is collecting charity cases this year," another woman joked. This time the laughter spread across the table. Olivia felt heat rise into her cheeks. The old embarrassment returned with familiar force. For a moment she was standing in the rejection ceremony again, surrounded by whispers and pity. She wished she were home. Then something unexpected happened. Every conversation inside the banquet hall stopped. Forks froze. Glasses halted halfway to lips. A strange silence swept through the room. Olivia looked up. At the far end of the hall, enormous doors had opened. A tall figure entered beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. Black formal attire, dark hair, silver eyes. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Power seemed to follow him like an invisible storm. Alpha King Damon Blackwood had arrived. Olivia had never seen him before, yet somehow she knew immediately who he was. Everyone rose to their feet. Everyone except Olivia. She had forgotten how to move. And as the Alpha King crossed the room, greeting nobles and officials with calm authority, his gaze suddenly lifted. Out of hundreds of people inside the hall, his silver eyes stopped on her. Olivia forgot the noise of the banquet hall. She forgot the laughter, the music, and even the dozens of eyes that had spent the evening judging her. All she could see were those silver eyes fixed directly on hers from across the room. For a brief moment, everything seemed strangely still. Then reality returned all at once. She quickly rose from her chair, embarrassed that she had remained seated while everyone else stood. Around her, nobles bowed respectfully. Victoria Ashford immediately straightened her posture, her expression transforming into practiced elegance. Olivia lowered her gaze, hoping the moment would pass. It did not. Alpha King Damon Blackwood continued walking through the hall, exchanging brief greetings with advisors and prominent families. His presence commanded attention without effort. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand obedience. Yet everyone seemed to adjust themselves the moment he entered their orbit. Olivia could understand why. There was something impossible to ignore about him. He carried himself with complete certainty, as if he had long ago stopped questioning whether he belonged in a room. Several young women near the front eagerly attempted to attract his attention. Some smiled. Others found excuses to speak as he passed. Damon acknowledged each of them politely, but his expression remained unreadable. Olivia slowly exhaled. Perhaps she had imagined his earlier glance. Perhaps he had simply been looking across the room. That explanation felt safer. Much safer. The banquet resumed after the king took his place near the front of the hall. Conversation gradually returned. Olivia focused on her meal and tried not to look toward the royal table. Unfortunately, Victoria was not finished. Did everyone notice? Victoria asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Our mysterious guest from Moonridge nearly forgot to stand when His Majesty entered. A few people laughed. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. It was an accident, she said quietly. Of course it was. Victoria smiled. I am sure palace etiquette is difficult when someone comes from such a small territory. More laughter followed. Olivia stared at her plate. She knew better than to argue. Experience had taught her that defending herself rarely changed anyone's mind. Across the room, musicians began playing a softer melody while servants moved between tables refilling drinks. Olivia concentrated on the music instead. She counted the notes in her head the way she often did when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. One measure, then another. Slowly her breathing steadied. The evening might have remained uncomfortable but manageable if not for the arrival of Lord Nathaniel Graves. The king's chief advisor was one of the most respected figures in the kingdom. The moment he approached Victoria's table, conversation stopped. Ladies, Nathaniel said with a courteous nod. His Majesty has requested a private audience with one of our guests. Excitement immediately spread through the group. Several women straightened in their chairs. Victoria practically glowed. The king wishes to meet Olivia Hart. Silence fell. Complete silence. Olivia blinked. For a moment she was convinced she had heard incorrectly. Victoria's confident smile disappeared. Excuse me, she asked. Nathaniel's expression remained calm. Olivia Hart of Moonridge. Olivia felt every eye at the table swing toward her. Her heartbeat accelerated instantly. Me? She asked before she could stop herself. Nathaniel offered a small smile. Yes, Miss Hart. If you would accompany me. No one laughed this time. No one seemed capable of speaking. Olivia slowly stood. Her legs felt unsteady. Questions rushed through her mind. Had she violated some royal protocol? Had she unknowingly offended someone important? Why would the Alpha King request a meeting with her of all people? She followed Nathaniel through the grand hall, past towering windows and crystal chandeliers. The farther they walked, the quieter the palace became. Eventually, they reached a long corridor lined with portraits of former rulers. Snow drifted outside the tall windows, covering the palace gardens in silver white. Nathaniel stopped before an enormous wooden door. His Majesty is inside, he said. Olivia swallowed hard. May I ask why he wants to see me? Nathaniel studied her for a moment. If I have learned anything about King Damon Blackwood, it is that he rarely does anything without a reason. That answer somehow made her even more nervous. Nathaniel opened the door. Warm light spilled into the hallway. Olivia stepped forward and entered the room. It was a private library filled with towering shelves and a crackling fireplace. At the far end, beside a large window overlooking the snowy kingdom, stood Alpha King Damon Blackwood. He turned as she entered. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then the king looked directly at her and said something that made Olivia's entire world shift. Miss Hart, he said calmly, do you know why your name was the first one on my list? Olivia stared at him. unsure whether she had heard the question correctly. The firelight dancing across the library walls seemed suddenly distant compared to the weight of those silver eyes fixed on her. "No, Your Majesty," she answered honestly. Damon studied her for a moment before turning toward the window. Snow drifted quietly beyond the glass, covering the palace gardens in white. "Most people would have spent the last 30 days inventing reasons," he said. "Some would assume it was because of family influence. Others would assume it was because of wealth." Olivia managed a small smile. "Neither of those would apply to me." To her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. It was not quite a smile, but it softened the severity of his expression. "No," he agreed. Silence settled between them again. Olivia became painfully aware of how large the room felt. The shelves stretched nearly 20 feet high. Thousands of books surrounded them. Yet despite all that space, she felt as though there were only two people in the entire palace. "Do you know what I see when I look at the women attending winter court?" Damon finally asked. Olivia hesitated. "Future candidates for whatever role you are seeking? That is what they want me to see." He turned back toward her. "But I asked what you see." The question caught her off guard. Nobody important ever asked what she thought. "I see confident women," she said carefully. "Women with powerful families. Women who belong here." "And yourself?" Olivia looked down. "Someone who does not." Damon remained quiet. The silence was not uncomfortable exactly. It felt more like he was considering every word she spoke. "That answer," he said at last, "is part of the reason your name caught my attention." Olivia frowned. "I do not understand. Most people spend their lives trying to appear important. You spend yours trying not to be noticed." She blinked. "How could you possibly know that?" Damon walked toward a nearby desk and opened a leather folder resting on its surface. "Because I requested reports." Olivia felt her stomach tighten. "Reports?" Every woman invited to winter court was investigated. He handed her several sheets of paper. Olivia stared at them in disbelief. The documents contained details about her life. Her work in Moonridge. Her volunteer hours helping elderly pack members. Her efforts organizing supplies during difficult winters. Even small acts she barely remembered were recorded there. "I do not understand," she whispered. "None of this is important." Damon looked directly at her. "That is where you are wrong." Olivia lowered the papers. Her hands suddenly felt unsteady. No one had ever paid attention to those things before. No one had considered them remarkable. "You helped people because they needed help," Damon continued. "Not because anyone was watching." She struggled to find words. "Most of it was nothing." "Nothing?" His eyebrow lifted slightly. "A woman spends years serving her community despite being ignored by it. She remains kind after public rejection. She continues showing compassion when bitterness would be easier. That is not nothing." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked away, embarrassed by the praise. "You make me sound better than I am." "No," Damon said quietly. "I simply read the reports." The fireplace crackled softly. Somewhere beyond the walls, the distant sounds of the palace continued, but they felt impossibly far away. Olivia found herself studying him more carefully. For years, she had heard stories about Alpha King Damon Blackwood. Most described a cold ruler who intimidated everyone around him. None had mentioned this version. The man standing before her seemed observant, thoughtful, far more interested in listening than speaking. "Why are you telling me all of this?" she finally asked. Damon's expression became serious again. The faint warmth vanished from his eyes. "Because there is something important you need to understand." Olivia's heartbeat quickened. He walked back toward the window and clasped his hands behind his back. "The kingdom is entering a difficult period. There are challenges ahead that most people do not yet see." His gaze moved toward the snow-covered horizon. "I need people I can trust." Olivia frowned. "There are hundreds of people more qualified than me." "Perhaps." Damon turned toward her once more. "But qualifications and character are not always the same thing." The words lingered in the room. Olivia felt as though she stood at the edge of something she could not yet see clearly. Something larger than herself. Something that had already begun moving long before she arrived at the palace. Then Damon reached into the folder on his desk and removed a single document sealed with the royal crest. He placed it carefully in front of her. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I am going to make an announcement that will surprise everyone in this kingdom." Olivia looked down at the sealed document. A strange feeling settled in her chest. "What kind of announcement?" Damon held her gaze for several long seconds before answering. one that involves you. Olivia stared at the sealed document long after Damon finished speaking. The royal crest seemed far heavier than ink pressed into parchment. It felt like the weight of a future she could not yet understand. "I think you are overestimating me," she said quietly. Damon did not immediately respond. Instead, he walked toward one of the towering shelves and removed an old leather-bound book. The cover appeared worn with age, its pages yellowed by decades. He placed it gently on the desk between them. "Most people who deserve power spend their lives believing they are ready for it," he said. "The people who question whether they deserve it are often the ones who carry it most carefully." Olivia looked down at the book. "What is this? A record of royal lineages." She frowned. "Why would I need to see that?" Damon opened the book and turned several pages before stopping near the center. His finger rested beside an illustration of a woman dressed in silver robes. Her hair was pale gold. Her eyes looked remarkably familiar. Olivia felt a strange chill travel through her chest. "Who is she?" Damon asked. Olivia studied the portrait. "I do not know. Her name was Eleanor Ashwin." Olivia shook her head. "I have never heard of her." "Few people have." Damon closed the book slowly. "Nearly 100 years ago, her family vanished from the kingdom's records. Officially, the bloodline ended." Olivia looked from the portrait back to him. "And what does that have to do with me?" Damon held her gaze. "Because according to evidence uncovered by royal historians, it did not end." The room suddenly felt smaller. "I still do not understand. Your family line can be traced back to hers." Olivia blinked. "That is impossible." That was my first reaction as well. Damon folded his hands behind his back, which is why I ordered 3 separate investigations before accepting the conclusion. Olivia stared at him. "You are saying I am related to some forgotten royal family?" "Not exactly." He paused. "I am saying you may be descended from one of the most influential Luna bloodlines in our kingdom's history." Olivia almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded completely absurd. "You cannot seriously believe that." "I do." His answer came without hesitation. The certainty in his voice made it difficult to dismiss. Olivia looked again toward the portrait. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable. Similar eyes, similar features, similar expression. "Even if that were true," she said carefully, "why would it matter now?" Damon moved toward the window. Snow continued falling beyond the glass. "Because certain traditions still matter to people in positions of influence. Because history shapes politics. Because symbols carry weight." He turned back toward her. "And because there are individuals inside this kingdom who have spent years searching for what was lost." Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken again. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. "Is that why I was invited?" she asked. "Partly." Damon walked back toward the desk. "But blood alone never would have earned my attention." Olivia remembered the reports, the volunteer work, the small acts of kindness nobody else considered important. "Then what did?" Damon studied her for several seconds. "You remained yourself." The answer caught her off guard. "What does that mean?" "Most people become whatever circumstances demand." His voice remained calm. "You did not." Olivia looked away. She thought of the rejection, the years afterward, the loneliness, the humiliation she rarely discussed with anyone. "I was not always strong." "I know." Damon surprised her again with that simple answer. "Strength is not the absence of pain. It is what a person chooses afterward." The words settled somewhere deep inside her. For years she had measured herself against what she lacked, against what others thought of her, against everything she failed to become. Nobody had ever suggested there might be value in simply continuing forward. A knock interrupted the silence. Nathaniel entered carrying several documents. "Your Majesty," he said, "the council meeting is scheduled for sunrise." Damon nodded. "Thank you." Nathaniel hesitated before looking toward Olivia. There was something unusual in his expression. Not pity, not amusement. Respect. The realization unsettled her almost as much as everything else. After Nathaniel departed, Damon picked up the sealed document and handed it to her. "Take this." Olivia accepted it carefully. "What is it?" "Instructions." "For what?" Damon looked directly into her eyes. "For tomorrow." Olivia swallowed. "You still have not told me what announcement you plan to make." A faint smile touched his face again. "That is because I would prefer you hear it the same way everyone else will." Her pulse quickened instantly. Damon moved toward the door and opened it for her. "Get some rest, Miss Hart." Olivia stepped into the hallway. "That is all?" she asked. Damon nodded once. For tonight. Then, just before the door closed, he added one final sentence. By this time tomorrow, the entire kingdom will know your name. Olivia barely slept. Long after returning to her guest chamber, she sat beside the window watching snow drift across the palace gardens while Damon's final words echoed through her mind. By this time tomorrow, the entire kingdom will know your name. She had spent years trying not to be noticed. The idea that thousands of people might suddenly know who she was felt less like an honor and more like standing at the edge of a cliff in heavy fog. Dawn arrived beneath a sky of silver clouds. Palace bells rang softly through the corridors, signaling the beginning of another day. Servants moved through the guest wing carrying trays of breakfast and fresh flowers. Everything appeared normal. Olivia felt anything but normal. The sealed document Damon had given her remained untouched on the small table beside her bed. She finally gathered enough courage to open it. Inside, she found a simple set of instructions requesting her attendance at the royal assembly at 10 o'clock sharp. No explanation. No details. Only a formal request bearing the king's seal. Her anxiety doubled immediately. By mid-morning, the palace buzzed with unusual energy. Guests moved through the corridors speaking in hushed voices. Rumors seemed to spread faster than snowfall. Olivia noticed people glancing toward her more often than before. Some expressions held curiosity. Others carried suspicion. As she entered the grand corridor leading toward the assembly hall, she heard her name spoken for the first time by complete strangers. That is her, someone whispered. The woman from Moonridge. Olivia lowered her gaze and continued walking. The attention felt overwhelming. Halfway down the corridor, Victoria Ashford appeared. Unlike their previous encounters, Victoria's smile looked strained. "Miss Hart," she said sweetly, "you seem popular today." Olivia offered a polite nod. "I am not sure why." "Really?" Victoria laughed softly. "After spending private time with the king, you still claim ignorance?" Several women standing nearby exchanged looks. Olivia immediately understood the trap. Victoria wanted a reaction. She wanted confirmation of whatever rumor currently circulated through the palace. Olivia simply answered, "His Majesty asked me questions." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Only questions?" Before Olivia could respond, another voice interrupted. "There you are." Nathaniel Graves approached from the far end of the corridor. Relief washed through Olivia instantly. "The assembly begins soon," he said. "His Majesty requested that I escort you personally." Victoria's expression darkened for only a fraction of a second before her practiced smile returned. "How fortunate." Nathaniel ignored the comment entirely. Together he and Olivia continued toward the assembly hall. "What is happening?" Olivia asked quietly once they were out of earshot. Nathaniel glanced at her. "The king intends to address the council, the noble houses, and all Winter Court guests." "About me?" "Partially." That answer offered little comfort. The enormous assembly hall was already crowded when they arrived. Hundreds of guests filled the seats rising along both sides of the chamber. Banners bearing the Blackwood crest hung from towering stone columns. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows nearly 30 feet tall, painting the floor with shades of gold and blue. Olivia had never seen so many important people gathered in one place. The moment she entered, conversations began fading. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Nathaniel guided her toward a reserved seat near the front. Not beside the nobles. Not among the guests. Closer to the royal platform itself. Olivia's pulse quickened. "I think there has been a mistake," she whispered. "There has not," Nathaniel replied. Moments later, the royal doors opened. Every person in the chamber rose simultaneously. Damon entered wearing formal black attire trimmed with silver. He moved with calm confidence toward the elevated platform overlooking the hall. The room became completely silent. Olivia watched him take his place before the throne, but remained standing. His gaze swept across the assembly. "Thank you for attending," he began. His voice carried easily throughout the chamber. "Today I intend to discuss the future of this kingdom." Every eye remained fixed on him. "For generations," Damon continued, "our stability has depended upon strong leadership, trusted alliances, and careful preparation for the future." Several council members nodded in agreement. "The future requires more than power. It requires legacy." A ripple of curiosity spread through the audience. Olivia felt her heartbeat growing louder. Somehow she knew this speech was moving towards something significant. Damon paused. Then his gaze found her across the hall. The entire chamber seemed to notice. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Olivia at once. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Damon spoke again. For that reason, I have made a decision that will affect the future of the crown itself. Olivia's breath caught. Then, before anyone else could speak, Lord Nathaniel Graves stepped forward carrying a sealed royal decree and announced, by order of Alpha King Damon Blackwood, a formal royal selection has been completed. The hall erupted into stunned whispers as Nathaniel opened the decree and prepared to read the name written inside. The hall fell completely silent as Nathaniel unfolded the decree. Olivia could hear nothing except the pounding of her own heartbeat. Hundreds of people watched the royal advisor. Hundreds of people waited for a name. Nathaniel's voice carried clearly through the chamber. By authority of Alpha King Damon Blackwood, after careful consideration and review, a royal candidate has been selected to participate in a formal future succession agreement. Confused whispers immediately spread through the audience. Olivia barely understood the words herself. A future succession agreement. The phrase sounded important, but its meaning remained unclear. Nathaniel continued. The selected candidate is Olivia Hart of Moonridge. For a moment, nobody reacted. The name seemed to hang in the air as if the room itself needed time to process it. Then disbelief erupted across the chamber. Conversations broke out everywhere at once. Several nobles stared openly at Olivia. Others exchanged shocked looks. Victoria Ashford looked as though someone had stolen the ground beneath her feet. Olivia sat frozen. She wondered if she should stand, speak, leave. None of those options seemed possible. Nathaniel lowered the decree and stepped back. The hall remained filled with confusion. Finally, one council member rose from his seat. Your Majesty, he said carefully. Surely further explanation is required. Damon nodded once. Agreed. The room quieted again. The Alpha King stepped forward. Many of you assumed Winter Court existed for a traditional selection. His silver eyes swept across the audience. It did not. More whispers followed. This kingdom faces challenges that cannot be solved through alliances alone. We need stability. We need continuity. We need leadership capable of serving future generations rather than personal ambition. Olivia noticed several influential families exchanging uncomfortable looks. Damon continued. For months, my advisors and historians conducted extensive reviews, not only of bloodlines, but of character. The last word seemed intentional. Character cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It reveals itself through choices. His gaze moved toward Olivia again. Through kindness when nobody is watching. Through integrity when there is no reward. The hall grew quieter with every sentence. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to disappear beneath her chair. Instead, everyone continued staring. Miss Hart possesses qualities this kingdom should value more highly than it currently does, Damon said. A woman from one of the noble houses stood suddenly. With respect, Your Majesty, she is not from an influential family. Damon looked toward her calmly. That observation is correct. Then how can she stand beside the crown? The challenge hung in the air. Nobody interrupted. Damon remained completely composed. Because the crown was never meant to belong exclusively to influential families. The answer silenced the room. Another council member rose more cautiously. Are you announcing an engagement? Olivia's breath caught. Damon shook his head. No, a wave of relief and confusion swept through the audience simultaneously. Then what exactly are you announcing? The council member asked. Damon paused. His next words seemed measured with extraordinary care. I am announcing that Olivia Hart will receive royal protection, royal education, and a formal position within the succession initiative established by this crown. The chamber erupted once again. Olivia struggled to keep up. Royal protection, royal education, succession initiative. None of it felt real. Nathaniel stepped forward carrying additional documents while officials began distributing copies throughout the assembly. Gradually, the confusion transformed into curiosity. Olivia realized this was not a marriage announcement, not a selection of a future queen. It was something different, something entirely new. Damon waited patiently until the noise subsided. Then he spoke one final time. The future of this kingdom will not be built solely by those born into privilege. It will also be shaped by those who earn trust through their actions. Many people still appeared skeptical. Others looked thoughtful, but something had undeniably changed. For the first time in her life, nobody was looking at Olivia with pity. They were looking at her as though she mattered. The realization felt overwhelming. As the assembly drew toward its conclusion, Damon descended from the platform. Advisors surrounded him immediately. Nobles attempted to secure conversations. Officials rushed forward with questions. Yet before leaving the chamber, the Alpha King stopped beside Olivia's seat. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Olivia almost laughed. "I do not think I handled anything." A faint smile appeared in his eyes. "You stayed." She looked around the crowded hall. "Half the kingdom seems confused." "That is temporary." He glanced toward the decree still resting in her hands. "What matters is what happens next." Olivia looked down at the document. "And what happens next?" Damon became serious again. "Tomorrow, you begin learning why your family's history was hidden." Olivia's pulse quickened instantly. "You mean the Luna bloodline?" Damon nodded. "There are truths even my historians have only recently uncovered." Before she could ask another question, Nathaniel approached with urgency in his expression. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "we found another record." Damon looked sharply toward him. "Are you certain?" "Yes." Nathaniel handed him a sealed folder. Damon opened it, scanned the first page, and for the first time since Olivia met him, genuine surprise crossed his face. Slowly, he lifted his eyes toward her. "It appears," he said carefully, "that your family's secret is far older than we realized." Olivia spent the rest of the afternoon unable to focus on anything else. The surprise she had seen on Damon's face lingered in her thoughts long after the assembly ended. Until now, he had always appeared calm and prepared, as though every possible outcome had already been considered. Seeing genuine shock in his expression unsettled her more than any announcement. By evening, snow covered the palace gardens in a smooth blanket of white. Golden lanterns illuminated winding paths between frozen fountains and silent statues. Olivia stood beside the window of her guest chamber, watching flakes drift through the darkness. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Nathaniel entered carrying a wooden box and several folders tucked beneath one arm. "His Majesty requested that these be delivered to you." Olivia looked toward the box. "What is it?" "Part of your family's history." Her pulse immediately quickened. Nathaniel placed everything on a nearby table before carefully opening the lid. Inside rested old letters, faded photographs, journals, and several pieces of jewelry tarnished by age. Olivia stepped closer. "Where did these come from?" "A forgotten archive beneath the eastern wing." Nathaniel removed one of the journals. "Most records connected to your ancestral line disappeared decades ago. We recently discovered that some had been intentionally hidden rather than destroyed." Olivia picked up a photograph. The woman pictured there looked remarkably familiar. Pale hair, light eyes, the same quiet expression she often saw in her own reflection. "She looks like me." "That is Eleanor Ashwin." Nathaniel nodded. "The woman Damon showed you." Olivia stared at the image. The resemblance was impossible to ignore now. Why would anyone hide this? Nathaniel hesitated. Because certain families benefited when the Ashwin line vanished from public memory. The answer raised even more questions. Before Olivia could ask them, another knock sounded at the door. This time Damon entered. Nathaniel immediately stepped aside. The king's attention moved toward the items spread across the table. "Have you looked through them yet?" he asked. Olivia shook her head. "Only briefly." Damon picked up one of the journals and opened it. Several pages contained sketches, family records, and handwritten notes. Then he turned to a section marked with a faded ribbon. "This is what surprised us." Olivia moved closer. The journal entry described a ceremonial gathering held more than a century earlier. At first, the details seemed ordinary. Then she noticed a specific passage. Her eyes widened. "That cannot be right." Damon looked at her. "We thought the same thing." The entry claimed the Ashwin bloodline had once been entrusted with a responsibility unlike any other family in the kingdom. They were not merely respected Luna descendants. According to the journal, they served as guardians of a tradition connected directly to the future succession of the crown. Olivia reread the words twice. "This says future heirs were once recognized through both royal lineage and Ashwin approval." "Correct." Damon folded his arms. "Which means your family line played a role in royal succession long before my reign." Olivia looked up slowly. "Then why has nobody mentioned this before?" Because the practice ended generations ago. Or someone wanted it forgotten, Nathaniel added quietly. The room fell silent. Olivia suddenly understood why discovering these records mattered. This was larger than family history, larger than Winter Court, larger even than the announcement. Her ancestors had once stood at the center of decisions that shaped the kingdom itself. Damon moved toward the window. For years, people assumed succession depended entirely on royal blood. He looked back toward her. Now we know there may have been another piece of the tradition. Olivia lowered her gaze toward the journal. The pages trembled slightly in her hands. And somehow that piece survived through my family. Yes. Damon spoke gently, even after everyone forgot. Olivia sat slowly in a nearby chair. The realization felt overwhelming. She had spent most of her life believing she came from nothing remarkable. Now every answer seemed to reveal another layer of history buried beneath generations of silence. Nathaniel gathered several documents and placed them before Damon. There is one more detail. Damon scanned the papers. His expression became thoughtful. Interesting. Olivia looked between them. What now? Damon handed her a single page. It contained a family tree stretching back nearly 100 years. One name near the bottom had been circled. Olivia stared at it. My grandmother? Damon nodded. Evelyn Hart knew more than she ever told you. Olivia's breath caught. Suddenly memories returned. Evelyn insisting she attend Winter Court. Evelyn never appearing surprised by any of the strange events surrounding the invitation. Evelyn telling her that perhaps she belonged exactly where she least expected. Damon watched understanding spread across Olivia's face. I believe your grandmother has been protecting this secret for a very long time. Olivia looked down at the circled name. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could process them. But one question stood above all the others. If Evelyn knew the truth, then what else had she never revealed? Olivia did not wait until morning. The moment Damon and Nathaniel left her chamber, she sat beside the window and wrote a letter home. By sunrise, a royal messenger was already traveling toward Moonridge carrying a request that could no longer be delayed. 3 days later, a carriage arrived at Blackwood Palace carrying Evelyn Hart. Olivia spotted her grandmother from the palace balcony and nearly ran down the grand staircase. The moment they reached each other, Evelyn pulled her into a warm embrace. You knew, Olivia whispered. Evelyn smiled softly. I knew enough. Why did you never tell me? The older woman looked toward the palace gardens where snow sparkled beneath the winter sun. Because some truths are safer when they arrive at the right time. Olivia had spent years accepting answers like that. This time she refused. No more riddles. Evelyn laughed quietly. You sound stronger than when you left Moonridge. Together they followed a palace attendant into a private sitting room where Damon and Nathaniel were already waiting. Several journals rested on the table beside maps and historical records. Evelyn's expression changed the moment she saw them. She sat down slowly. So you found the archives? Damon nodded. Not all of them, but enough. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Evelyn reached for one of the journals and gently traced the faded cover. My grandmother showed me these when I was younger than Olivia. Olivia's breath caught. Then it is true? Evelyn looked directly at her granddaughter. Yes. The room fell silent. The Ashwin bloodline never disappeared. Families loyal to the crown protected it by scattering records and changing names. They believed one day the line would be needed again. Olivia struggled to absorb the words. Needed for what? Evelyn's eyes moved toward Damon. To help guide the future. Nathaniel exchanged a glance with the king. Damon finally spoke. The more we uncover, the clearer one thing becomes. The Ashwin line was never intended to control succession. It existed to protect it. Evelyn nodded. Power alone was never meant to decide the future of the kingdom. Character mattered too. Olivia remembered the words Damon had spoken in the library. Character cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It reveals itself through choices. Suddenly, everything seemed connected. The hidden records, the investigations, the royal announcement, even Winter Court itself. Damon stepped closer to the table. For years I searched for a way to strengthen the future of this kingdom. His silver eyes settled on Olivia. I believed the answer would come from powerful alliances. He paused. I was wrong. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. Then what is the answer? Damon looked at her with a calm certainty she had come to recognize. People who choose service over status. People who remain kind after disappointment. People who continue moving forward when the world expects them to stop. The room grew quiet again. Evelyn smiled knowingly. Your grandfather used to say something similar. Olivia lowered her gaze. For so long she had believed her rejection defined her story. She had measured herself by what she lost instead of what she became afterward. Now, sitting inside the palace she never expected to enter, surrounded by people discussing the future of an entire kingdom, she finally understood something important. None of this had begun with royal bloodlines. None of it had begun with ancient records. It had begun with ordinary choices repeated over and over again when nobody was paying attention. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its grip on the kingdom. The official announcement continued generating discussion throughout every territory. Some people remained skeptical. Others became supportive. Yet gradually public opinion shifted. The woman once dismissed as unimportant became a symbol of possibility. Olivia dedicated herself to the education Damon arranged. She studied history, diplomacy, law, and leadership. She spent time meeting citizens from every region of the kingdom. And with each passing day, she felt less like a visitor and more like someone building a future. One afternoon, as early spring sunlight filled the palace gardens, Damon joined her beside a fountain where the last traces of snow were melting away. You seem happier, he observed. Olivia smiled. I think I finally stopped asking why all of this happened. And what do you ask now? She looked toward the horizon where green fields stretched beyond the city walls. What I should do with it? Damon nodded approvingly. That is a much better question. They stood together in comfortable silence. The kingdom beyond the palace continued changing. So did Olivia. Months earlier she had arrived believing she did not belong. Now she understood belonging was not something granted by other people. It was something discovered through purpose. As the afternoon sun painted the gardens in gold, palace bells echoed across the city. Citizens paused to listen. Merchants smiled. Children ran through the streets. Life moved forward. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, stories were already spreading about the rejected Omega who had changed the future of the kingdom not through power, wealth, or influence, but through quiet strength. Olivia watched the sunlight dance across the fountain water and felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. Not because every question had been answered, not because the future was certain, but because she finally knew who she was. And for the first time, that was enough.